We remember why we're here and who we are. Welcome to the Proper Cap, a Madcap Coffee podcast. I'm Trevor Corlett here with my co-host Josiah, and we're going to talk about coffee competitions. But
Heads up.
Before we get there, we're enjoying a seasonal beverage from our cafe menu right now. What are we drinking, Josiah?
Yeah, so naturally we had to drink, it's called the Julius Winfield, and this drink was designed by Fulton Cafe manager Ravi Patel, and he actually competed last year. So that also is an interesting connection to this.
Well done, Ravi.
But yeah, this is a milk clarified espresso, cold coffee, lots of citrus. It's very reminiscent of like the orange like push pop creamsicle situation. Very refreshing. Found at Madcap cafes this summer.
That cold foam is on point, fluffy.
Yeah, they're doing a nice job with that foam.
I remember the first iterations of this, that foam dissipated super fast.
Yeah, Ravi's definitely put some time workshopping into this drink, which honestly kind of comes with all the drinks that fall on the seasonal drink menu. It takes a lot of time and energy to come up with. But yeah, I should say he. It's not we. We worked the minor figures booth at Expo a couple months ago, and Ravi had kind of showcased a similar iteration of this drink. And I think then from that point on, he kind of workshopped the foam to really get that texture to hold. And it's really nice as it integrates.
The flavor changes as
Yeah.
They've obviously been sitting here for a while.
For a hot
when they were first served to us. You had nice differentiations of layers.
It's easier to see at first too. He like custom ordered ice cubes for this because you got to use clear ice when you're doing milk clarification. You got clear espresso, you got to have clear ice. So hats off to Ravi for
cheers. It's
this drink.
Delicious. It starts to look like egg drop soup.
Tastes better than egg drop soup.
Yeah, I mean, I like some good egg drop soup.
Yeah. So naturally, when we were talking about, let's talk about competition, it was just like thinking about what drink are we going to drink. I feel like we just had to talk about a seasonal drink from from the menu. We always have a couple seasonal drinks that rotate throughout the year, but I feel like the DNA, the birthplace of that section of the menu is competition.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I was trying to remember when we first opened. I don't outside of what's on, our standard menu, Madcap doesn't have a lot of flavored drinks. We have the Cafe Miel, which we should probably dedicate a whole episode to the Cafe Miel, actually. More to come on that. But that's a honey cinnamon latte. The mocha. Mm-hmm. Those are the only two vanilla flavored vanilla off menu. Yeah. Off menu vanilla latte. But yeah, I'd have to go back and look in the archives to see when the seasonal drink menu was definitely inspired by competition. Yeah. And it definitely, myself and former business partner were competing at this. When I started Madcap, I was already competing, and kind of after a few years of a few of us being involved in competition at that point, I mean, there was probably I think there was a point we had 10 employees and 5 of us were participating in competition. We had high participation rates at the time, but yeah, there was a point where we were like, oh my gosh, we're spending all this time making these drinks. Yeah. And then, if you don't get very far, you maybe served it to 8 people if you're lucky, and then you don't ever do anything with that drink again. And so we decided, hey, we need to put these on the menu, and then I'm sure we'll get into it, but as a drink looks for competition, it doesn't really translate well to the average consumer, and it wouldn't necessarily be something they would enjoy. Right. So we had to manipulate them a little bit. And even Ravi's drink, I mean, it's not a far cry from what he did for the minor figures thing. Yeah. Definitely some improvements, but I think even then for that, he got such good feedback. They were like, we got to put this thing on the menu.
Yeah. But, and this is definitely like a tweak. Like, this isn't something that you could pull off on the competition stage. A quick sidebar on competition. So there's 3 courses that you serve 4 judges, and one of them is like a coffee mocktail of sorts. But you have to prepare it on site. So like milk clarification is a time consuming thing.
Yeah.
So he could probably do a
Could
riff
be one
of
of your
this.
one of your prepped ingredients maybe or
Yeah,
something. But
that's true. So yeah, it's cool to see, like you said, there's so much time that goes into preparing that one course for just a 15-minute presentation that you might just do once. And so it's like, let's create a space to showcase that creativity. I think for a while, this was before I worked at Madcap. So there were 4 cafes, and each cafe was doing different seasonal drinks at one point, right?
Yeah.
Now it's a little bit more uniform.
Yeah, it definitely, yeah, we, we'd featured Friday. There was a program we did, just a special drink that we only did on Fridays. It's had different iterations and journeys. And now obviously I think our cafes are pretty spread out through the state. And so, if a customer sees a drink on our Instagram, they want to have that regardless of which location they go to. So we've standardized it, which has made it easier from a cost perspective and everything else. But it came from competition. Now our program's a standalone thing where maybe it's inspired. Maybe we have a drink inspired by a competitor of ours, but more often than not, they're built by the baristas specifically for the season that we're serving it in. We have an application process. The baristas submit drink ideas and become a part of the process. And if you go through our Instagram, you can see, Revy is highlighted and had to subject himself to a photo shoot of building this drink for us. So
contractually obligated.
Yeah, we own his likeness now. Thanks, Revy. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that could, we could spend a whole episode on our seasonal drink program, but I think it's a good opportunity to transition to competition.
Totally.
You are probably more relevant at this point than I am, based on, I competed for 10 years and it's been 9 years since I last competed and hope to never do so again. But
I might be more recently involved, but still when Trevor walks into the room, there's definitely more people that know Trevor.
There's still enough old people hanging around. Coaching.
But literally, so I've gotten involved with competition, not because I've competed, but my role here at Madcap has involved helping baristas get ready for competition. But then also I started judging the past few years, and recently competition has just come up internally, and we kind of try to guide people along and scare people away, but also just offer resources to help them be successful. And we're like, we should talk about this on the podcast. One, to inform people about competition as a whole. It's a very weird niche thing, but then also to just share some thoughts and ideas on it.
Yeah. And it's kind of a divisive thing, as we were kind of talking about before we started recording. There's some recent podcasts of people discussing competition. Some of them have a positive bent, some of them have a negative bent. There's some different perspectives on if it's a valuable thing, if it's good for our industry. It does tend to inspire some trends that maybe aren't necessarily positive. A lot of things that don't translate into cafes, which I think it speaks a lot. I mean, we could talk a lot about, and I think it's important to talk about, at least from Madcap's perspective, and whether, there's a variety. I mean, maybe you should actually introduce, in case any of our listeners don't know what these things are. I specifically had said we're talking about coffee competitions because there's a variety of different ones.
Yeah. So U.S. coffee competition. What does the USCC stand for?
U.S. Coffee Championships?
Coffee Championships. Yeah. That's the last C. There's actually, I think, 6 total competitions where coffee people can compete in. What typically ends up taking the limelight is called the Barista competition, and it's more of like an espresso forward competition. That's the one that you participated in for a decade. You serve an espresso course, a milk course, so somewhat like a macchiato cappuccino course, and then a signature drink mocktail situation. And then there's Brewer's Cup, which is more pour over. Cup tasters, where you're just slurping coffee and guessing what it is. Roaster, we're in a roastery. There's a roaster competition. Latte art. Coffee and Good Spirits.
Yeah.
and I feel like I might be missing one, and I apologize to those competitors. But I feel like, per your experience, we gravitate towards encouraging people towards the barista competition. We've had Brewers Cup competitors as well. And those are two things that translate to what our baristas are doing on a daily basis. I guess we've had some coffee and good spirits competitors
we
as
had
well.
coffee and good spirits. We had a couple roasters.
Roasters.
We had
Wow,
a
I'm
couple
so
cup
wrong.
tasters.
I am
Yeah,
so wrong. No latte
no
art.
latte art. No, we haven't messed with that. That one looks very different than latte art throwdown. But yeah, we've dabbled and we've tried to encourage people to pursue any and all of them. For a variety of reasons.
Yeah. But essentially, this isn't necessarily like what you'd picture, like the NBA or whatever, where you've got a game every week and you're like practicing nonstop. It's kind of like, it's shifted throughout the years, but really it's 2, maybe 3 events throughout the calendar year where you're qualifying for this final national event, essentially. But you are training a lot. You're at least some people are training year round. Some people are putting in a few weeks. So there is a big discrepancy between the top and the bottom, essentially. But yeah, it's a cool, from what I've been able to experience, it's a cool, small, tight-knit community of the coffee industry. People coming from all over the country, sometimes outside of the country. And those are like those moments where you get to see each other, essentially. And yeah, so that's kind of what coffee competition is. There is a winner. There's a United States barista champion, and that person moves on to what's like the Olympics, the World Coffee Championship. So it's not just a US thing. This is a global thing. And in fact, the US haven't really, when was the last time we won Worlds? Was it?
I want to say it was, I might be wrong, but Pete Licata might have been the last World Barista champion.
10 plus
2013,
years ago?
which was 12 years ago.
Yeah. So it's been a minute, which is cool. Like, it shows just how much attention this is getting, and the other competitions as well get in other countries.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would love to hear from you, especially given how much time and energy you put into it. Like, why did you keep coming back to it for 10 years straight? Not too many competitors can say that.
Yeah.
And then why do you still encourage your employees to lean into this thing?
Yeah, my first exposure to it, before I started Madcap, I had a couple separate failed coffee concepts. And the one just before Madcap, I had owned a cafe and roastery in Illinois, south of Chicago, and kind of isolated. There wasn't any other specialty coffee around. I was still, I would say I was fairly new to the industry. And the first time I remember being exposed to competition, I think Intelligentsia, I discovered they were hosting one in Chicago. And it was, this was 2006. So it was only, I believe the US competition had just, or 2004 maybe was when it really started gaining traction, or was started somewhere around there. So it was only a couple years in. Yeah. But if I remember correctly, Kendall College in Chicago was where it was being held, hosted by Intelligentsia. And so I drove up there to go watch this thing just out of curiosity and really just desiring to see other specialty coffee in action. But yeah, so I was exposed, and the structure then, I mean, I guess it sort of looked a lot different, but also very similar and coursed, and the presentation and being on stage and the music and everything else. And I remember being very captivated by it, but also as an owner of a coffee shop, my perspective was like, ooh, this would be a really interesting opportunity for me to see how what I do compares to what other, like, these other major players in the industry are doing.
Put yourself up against competitors, essentially.
Yeah. And so being that, I was in a small town and, didn't have anyone else to really compare myself to, I was just curious for my own benefit. Like, how is the coffee I'm roasting and the drinks I'm making compare to Intelligentsia's or the Coffee Hound or Metropolis, trying to think of some of the folks at the time. But so that was my motivation in getting involved, was I just wanted to see how what I was doing compared to what, you know,
kind of vulnerable
from a it's a glutton for punishment, but yeah, a very formal professional environment is how I perceived it, right? So that was sort of what it inspired me initially. And it took me 2 years. And the first year I competed was 2008, and went into it not completely blind. YouTube, I remember, I think 2007, James Hoffman won the World Barista Championship that year, and I remember he used one of the first doserless grinders, Malkonix K30 grinder, which I don't know if I'd seen before I watched him use it.
Yeah.
And then decided, you know, I need to use one of those to compete with, and managed to convince Malkonig to loan me one for my first competition. And my tech scores were all like, you don't know how to use it. I had no clue how to use this grinder. I was using it completely wrong.
So you get scored for like on tech in terms of like, there's two different scores of sensory and tech. And tech is like, are you spilling? Are you wasting things? And if you are using the equipment appropriately?
Right. Tech is very black and white in terms of there's not much room for misinterpretation there in terms
Grinders
of like, did you
messy.
or did you not do it? Yeah. So I got a lot of feedback on my grinder usage, my poor use of it. But yeah, you know, it really, I was excited to be on this platform to see, you know, how things would stack up. And you know, I just remember there was like 6 or 7 Intelligentsia competitors competing. Altera Coffee had quite a few people competing. There were no restrictions at that time in terms of like limiting companies to a certain number of competitors or anything. And so I just remember being like super overwhelmed and intimidated. And yet I think this still holds to be true, maybe even more so than it was. But I just remember, you know, I bonded with a few other competitors there, really connected with other first-time competitors and things like that. You're sort of all subjecting yourselves to this similar sort of hell in that moment. And like, why are we here? And why are we making coffee on stage in front of people and being told, you know, it was, you know, okay. You know,
that was an acceptable shot.
Acceptable espresso. But yeah, I remember that was in Milwaukee. I finished in 7th place, and this tells you a lot about my personality. I was just like, that was horrible. Why did I do this? I can't believe, you know, 7th out of, I don't know, you know, 30 competitors. I took it really hard, and I actually had one of my judges actually ran me down afterwards to tell me like, hey, I don't think you understand how well you did for your first time out. Like, hopefully you're considering continue to do this. And that was kind of a turning point for me that said, you know what, okay, I'll keep going at it. And so I think both my, you know, personality of wanting to improve, and then, you know, getting good feedback as a business owner who owned a small mom and pop cafe and roastery, and then just being super competitive, like all of those things sort of coalesced. But the other thing too, when I went back into my cafe space, and, you know, I was working every day behind bar, I had this sudden epiphany that like I was all this work I had done for this game, I was better at my job. I had become more efficient because suddenly I'm, you know, like you were talking about waste and things, everything was, you know, in my mind, I was thinking points, and like, those are going to get me more points. And I would even argue that in working on my presentation and how I talked about the coffees and presented the drinks and things, it changed the way I was talking to my customers on a daily basis. And so those were the early seeds that were planted when I first started, where it was like wanting to see how I stacked up, but then realizing, because I think I was an owner, that like, wow, this is making me better at my job and giving me a different perspective into this thing that I do every day. And those were the things that then encouraged me to keep doing it for 10 years.
Yeah. And I know we talked in the episode where we interviewed Rihanna, the cafe manager at Monroe, we talked a little bit about competition, I think, because we see that with baristas at Madcap when they compete, they kind of come back with similar lessons learned of like, how can I be more efficient? How can I be cleaner? And take away some of those lessons and then apply them into their day to day. Yeah, I think highlighting how competition is like a game, I think is such a helpful perspective on it, because there's score sheets, there are rules, and there are ways to score points and there are ways to not score points. And I think I've seen people get frustrated when they're not scoring the points, and it's like, well, you're not doing the thing that you can score points.
I think, I mean, you see more now. I mean, when I started, it wasn't uncommon for, the web designer for a coffee company to do competition and be successful at it with the right coaching. And that to say, there were a lot of people who weren't necessarily day-to-day baristas that were participating. And probably based on your statement, I would argue they probably had more of an advantage, because the things that they did every day, as a barista, they can get in the way of the fact that, like, well, I understand that maybe that's what you're doing, but to capitalize off of getting the most points and being more successful in this environment, you may do this thing. And so I think it's the interesting thing about competition. I think, in doing it for 10 years, I had a moderate amount of success, was never able to win the US. And a lot of that, I think, was based on decisions I made. It had nothing to do with the coffees I was using, but definitely me and the decisions I was making and what I was presenting judges. I'd like to say that I knew enough that if I had maybe done some things differently, I could have got a win. But I think very early on, it became very important to me, especially once I started Madcap and was representing Madcap when I competed, that I really never wanted to do anything on a competition stage that I wouldn't be willing to do in one of my cafes or any of my cafes. And that included like the coffee that we served. Like, I think because I was a business owner, my perspective was that I wanted to serve people a coffee. I wanted people seeing me serving a coffee on stage, that someone watching could turn around and then go buy that coffee or have that coffee in one of our cafes. And so it was always sort of a point of frustration for me that oftentimes was sourcing that would happen. It happened just for competition, and it does still happen, and that's totally fine if that's what people want to do for competition. But more often than not, I think, there's an ability to, it is a coffee competition that is judged based on the quality of coffee, but it's really your ability as a coffee professional to serve it and describe that experience well and check the boxes of the game to get the most points out of that situation. And so as having helped with our competitors, it's kind of, we've maintained that ethos. Our competitors use a coffee that we have available at that time.
And I think at times it can be frustrating, especially like baristas who will go to a regional or make it to nationals, and then they're showing up with a washed coffee, and you naturally chat with the other competitors who are using a variety of different coffees, and you can smell it backstage. But I think like having that principle that you just outlined of like offering something that we want our customers to be able to interact with is a special thing that is pretty unique. Otherwise, it's just that table of judges who get to taste that coffee, and it can be beautiful coffees. I've had really, really incredible shots of espresso at the judges' table, but not too many people have tasted that coffee, which is kind of a bummer. And I know people are trying to like do different things where they're trying to sell competition grade coffee after competition, which is cool to see. But there's something cool about showing up with Pacamara La Gloria and being able to represent the Rodriguez's and a coffee that we've stood on
that we always have. Absolutely. And I think, it is, there are different competitive advantages to how people select coffee for competition. And, it could be a lot harder to accurately describe a washed, Colombian coffee, because because it is a little more subtle and nuanced and complex.
Yeah.
And if you make an error in your extraction, your flavor notes are not going to match up exactly as maybe a natural or a co-fermented coffee, where the flavors are a lot more clearly defined and pretty more consistently present. And so it does require a little bit more of you, depending on which route you choose. And so it's not necessarily that one coffee is better than another.
Right.
And I think that's where sometimes people get confused with some of the competitions, is that it's your ability to execute that coffee well, but then also describe that experience well.
Yeah. It might be outlined in the rules, but I know one of the head judges this past year was kind of painting this picture that I found really helpful of, you could create a really big target with a flavor call, right? And be like, it's going to taste like chocolate. And it's going to be pretty easy to hit that target. But creating a really small target and nailing that target is a lot more difficult. And I kind of think wash coffee is similar to that, where it's like, it requires you to have a pretty small target, which makes it pretty tricky to like identify and nail. And then for 4 sensory judges to also have that same experience. But when you do, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
There's other coffees that it's like, maybe it's a medium-sized target and you got 4 for 4. Everyone got that. Your point scale is just going off the chain. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it just speaks to, we're kind of talking a lot about barista competition, but I think the nature of espresso and how, sometimes a couple seconds, if your shot runs a couple seconds too long, it's not going to taste the same. Exactly the same, right? And so when you're preparing for that and everything is timed, and you're trying to make decisions on the fly, like do I have time to re-pull those shots if I feel like they're not going to taste the way I think that should taste. And there's a lot that goes into it that I think you don't really realize is going through a barista's mind when you're watching it.
Right.
I know judges, there's an amount of pressure, and you all kind of know to a certain extent, even if you haven't competed before, kind of what's happening behind the scenes a little bit, and a lot of work that's going on.
I'm freaking nervous as a judge. Like less so like early on when I was like first, like 2 years ago, whatever. I remember the first panel I sat on, I was like, because this person put so much time and energy into preparing for this thing, that I'm just like, I don't want to mess this up for them. You know what I mean? And like, I guess with more experience, you get more comfortable doing it. But yeah, I've
definitely heard that a lot before from judges who feel a lot of pressure and like making sure that they're evaluating things well. Cause once you've done it enough and you've done it at different levels of judging, there's an awareness there of how seriously the competitors are taking it and how important it is, and wanting to get it right.
And you talked a bit about this, but especially from a judge's perspective, it's all about, like, it's a feedback opportunity. Like, it's a game. The whole competition is a game, but it's also this opportunity for competitors to receive feedback. And so it's on the judges to give feedback. And so when you have 5 seconds to taste an espresso and then mentally take notes and jot down a few scribbles on your score sheet to then be able to give constructive feedback, and then encouragement of, hey, that 7th was like, please come back next year, like there's a lot of pressure on that. But if you don't give that feedback, it's kind of a wasted opportunity.
That was one of the things, I kind of want to get into the divisiveness of it a little bit, but another thing that kept me coming back, besides the things I mentioned, I built some amazing friendships with individuals, especially fellow competitors, because I think the thing you realize, from a competitive standpoint, you really quickly, or you should realize that really, while you are competing against other people, you have no direct impact on how someone else performs. And so really, you sort of ultimately are competing against yourself. So then you suddenly find yourself, in this backstage competitors area with all these individuals who are going through the same sort of torment together. And so you end up, developing I developed a lot. There's a lot of camaraderie that came with that, and a lot of friendships were built. And and you're loaning people glassware because somebody's glassware broke, in transportation, and helping people with grinders and all sorts of things. And so that was one of the special pieces for me, is just and then doing it for 10 years too. Then it was to the point where I knew all the judges probably too well at that point, the ones that were consistently coming back year after year. And so, but it made it that much more fun, to be a part of, sort of, knowing that you're all kind of doing this together. And, it creates healthy trash talk and motivation pieces. And I still remember, it was actually the only first place I ever won was for a regional event at the time. This was when they were trying to explore different structures and things, but it was the big Eastern competition, and they tried doing live scoring one year.
That's crazy.
And so, typically you'd compete, and maybe there's a first round, and you get through 20, 30 people, and then at the end they announce, oh, these top however many, 15 or 6, depending on what round it is, are going to move on. And as a judge, you can appreciate this, where they're like kind of cranking the scores out pretty quickly, but it'd be like, you get 3 or 4 in, and then they'd post a score. And so you're seeing live kind of like where you land. And so I remember I was towards the, probably the last third of competitors, and my score got posted, and I went into first place. And I knew there were at least 2 individuals that I remember off the top of my head are like, crap. Like I'm probably going to end up getting second or third again, which I got second or third a lot. And so it stressed me out so much that I'm like, I got to get out of here. I can't hang around. So I actually went and sat at a bar and was just nursing a beer and just hanging out. And then all of a sudden, Sam Lewanton texted me, Sam Lewanton, who was also competing. He was one of the individuals who I was nervous about, sent me a congratulation text. And I'm like, congrats for what? And he's like, well, you won. The scores have been posted. Like, I can't remember if he was last or what have you. Lem Butler, I think, had just gone, and his score got posted. And I ended up getting first place. And it was so anticlimactic. But a fellow competitor was nice enough to text me. And then I think, both of them, I mean, Lem ended up winning that year. So that tells you how I did once I went to nationals. But
when it really mattered. That's a very honorable thing to do, though, as a fellow competitor, to be like texting you and saying congrats.
And I was like, crap, I gotta get over there. And so I don't know how I felt about that structure. It was kind of nicer, being like, oh, this is the top 6, and then figuring out, I don't know. None of those situations are actually super fun to be in, but
high stress. But to your point, tons of community, tight knit. Something that I've heard a lot of chatter about around the competition scene is just backing from companies. And like, you shared a lot about your experience competing and like the lessons you took away from it. But I think it'd be interesting to talk about like why essentially you encourage baristas to compete. I don't know if that's kind of bringing up a previous question that we've already kind of flushed out, but I think it's important to point out how rare it is. Like, well, one, it's an expensive thing.
Yeah.
It requires a decent amount of coffee. It requires time on baristas to train. It often requires travel, and you're flying somewhere, driving somewhere, and staying somewhere. And we don't need to get into like the fine print nitty gritty, but I just think like the overarching, like, why is this something that is important to Madcap and then other companies? Because there are a few others who have similar mindset towards it.
And I think that the accessibility, it speaks to the accessibility of competition. I think that's one of the divisive things about it, is a lot of, all the things you described that are sort of investments you have to make if you're going to compete. If you don't have a company to support you, it does alienate a lot of people who and it tends to be called kind of a paid to play sort of thing. And I think, even when I started, it tended to be that for a few years it was kind of the same companies dominating, and it was sort of like, well, they have the money to invest in, whether it's coffees or the education piece or whatever. And I think, well, I never won. I think we were kind of one of the companies that was sort of just gritty in our approach to, like, one, just finding ways to do it every year, with limited resources, and then, with enough practice, you meet a certain amount of success. But yeah, it became important to me. I did, talking about some of the things and sort of my motivation for getting into it. But I think, as being our learning and development manager at Madcap, like, professional development is really important to us. Mm-hmm. And so I think competition, and why we support the preparation by, providing people with coffee, helping them with their travel, and all the coaching and everything else, is because of, how it changed and grew me as a professional on an individual level. Yeah. And so I think there's growth to be had there. But I think also, like, it just adds, from a cultural perspective, being a barista or a roaster or, any of those competitions that you're involved, if you're doing that stuff on a day-to-day basis, it's a very monotonous thing. And so you're serving, for the most part, the same drinks every day. You get I joke with the staff sometimes that, like, when I'm sitting in the cafe and I hear the customers' questions, like, yeah, they're asking the same questions 25 years ago. Those questions that are bothering you now, that they were the same questions 25 years ago. The questions haven't really changed, but there's a amount of monotony there that it makes it hard to be excited about the job sometimes. And so I think, the platform of competition, provides an experience that is similar but different, and you build community through it. It gives you a different light or a different lens to look at what you do through, and ends up tending to motivate people, I think, in a different way. And it'll be interesting to see, obviously, under the World Coffee, there's specific competitions that exist. I know, there's Level Up, I think, is a new one that's coming out. So there's different folks getting together, Coffee Masters. There's a handful of other competitions out there.
League is out there.
Barista League. And so there's these different platforms that I think, one, it provides folks an opportunity for personal, professional development. But also, just being motivating, in ways that, it's really easy to become disenfranchised, I think, with what you do on a daily basis when you're trying to push through the monotony. So it provides that platform in a different capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. I think saying it's same but different is helpful, because it is like, it's a barista competition, but being a barista is a little bit different than being on the stage of a barista competition. Like, there's some other things involved. You don't have to deal with a milk order halfway through your presentation or those questions from customers and providing.
I mean, Crush Lamar Zocco did the Crush the Rush competition, and you had to put away a milk order while making drinks, which was pretty cool.
They got to bring that back.
That would be.
Madcap did pretty well.
We got a win on that one in Chicago. Kudos to the team that went out at the time. Yeah. But because the other component is too, because I was thinking about this, like, we try to do in-house competitions as a way of preparing people for the upcoming competition season, and trying to gauge who's interested, and who should we send, and because we can't necessarily send everyone, but I think it, depending on the year and who's involved, like, we see interests come and go. Like, we always have one or two people, but there are years where we had, goodness, half a dozen or more people interested. And those internal things are good and well, even if you were doing nothing else and you're just providing that sort of platform. But I know, even for myself, like, it's cool being able to send people to, especially baristas. I mean, we've had people who are like barista, I think a Uriel, and it's like he was a barista for us for like a year, decided to do Brewers Cup, and Madcap was his first coffee job, and just you suddenly get exposure to this greater world that, in whatever community your shop is in, you maybe weren't exposed to that level of industry or community. And so then suddenly you're getting to see what what are people doing in Santa Cruz and New York and Austin and Seattle and these different places, and tasting their coffee and seeing what drinks they're making. And so you see what commonalities exist, and you see what differences are there. And it becomes a way to just, be encouraged and motivated by being exposed to what other people in the world are doing.
Yeah. He got like top 10 that year,
He
right?
He did really well
With like Tano Hindogo.
Yeah, with a Kenyan coffee from Madcap.
That's awesome.
Which we tried to talk him out of using, just because we knew kind of what what coffees people would be using. Well. And he crushed it. He did such a good job. And then he decided to do Barista the next year, and it was really more preparation issues on his part, but
squeaked into nationals and showed up in Portland.
And I'm trying to remember whose coffee he was using. I mean, we had
Nelson Moreno.
Nelson for nationals. I think he did video call with Nelson after he competed, so we were able to connect him with the producer whose coffee he was using, which was a pretty awesome moment.
Yeah.
But I think those are the things where it's like, again, like here you have pretty new barista who is serving a product every day behind bar, and suddenly you get to interact with it in a whole new light. I mean, when you're preparing for competition, if you're approaching it in a way that sets you up for success, you're going to be tasting that coffees in ways that you maybe never would think to dial a coffee in, on a normal day-to-day basis behind bar and things. And you just want to know everything you can about that coffee. And so it's suddenly, it can either burn you out or it can get you really excited. Right.
I would say a similar thing comes from judging too. It's nice because it's a little bit lower stakes. Like you're not, in the sense that you're not having to put a year of training into getting ready for this event. Mm-hmm. You more so show up a couple days early and you go through some trainings and really like get super caffeinated. But it's a way to test your ability to taste things, to dissect things, and then feedback. And that I found that to be a really helpful professional development as well. For my role specifically, because I do that a lot, but also other peers who are judging come from a slew of backgrounds, some in coffee, some not in coffee. So it's kind of a cool sub community of the competition community too.
Do you feel like judging had a significant impact? Like when you came back the first couple times, did it change how you looked at coffee from an evaluation standpoint, or do you feel like it reinforced things you already knew, or like what were your feelings coming back from that experience?
This might be a testament to essentially what you've created here, because I think it reinforced a lot more. Going into judging, I didn't know what to expect, but I had gone through Madcap's training program and had been in the learning and development role for a little bit. And so I was familiar with our concept of like assessments and score sheets and feedback in that regard. So this, I think, was same but different in that sense. So if anything, I think for me, it really helped with the feedback and being able to communicate what I was experiencing. Because I think it's easier to be like, that espresso was fine, but like what made it fine, what was good, what was bad, what was intensity and quality, and like dissecting that and being able to do that fast. Because I think that just takes time, and it takes a lot of opportunity to drink a lot of espresso, but then also do that in community and share with other people and hear what other people are saying too. Because I mean, I'd like to think that I keep getting better as I do it, because early on I remember hearing people talk about it and be like, wow, that was really cool how they described that. I like that. And you kind of like take from them. So I feel like it reinforced a lot. I definitely came back and amplified what I was doing a little bit more to encourage our baristas to shape how we talk about things internally a little bit further. And in one of the kind of byproducts of that I don't really communicate to them is like, when they want to compete, they'll be like, oh, I've already like experienced this score sheet on my espresso certification test. Like it's not super foreign. Like I already know how to talk about taste experience and tactile experience and what that means and what words are the game asking for. So it took me having to learn what are those words, what's the language, which we kind of already have baked into our training program. So yeah, it's an ongoing professional development experience, I should say, because I don't think you ever learn it all.
No.
Like there's
Well, in the competition, I mean, you've judged a couple of years, and so can you speak to the fact that there's subtle changes that happen, even if there isn't rule changes? There's sort of, you can't just do this. If you get second one year, you're not going to do the same exact thing next year and be like, oh, if I tweak this one thing, then I'm going to get first place, right? That's not quite how it works. It's kind of an organic, evolving thing.
Yeah, and there seems to be like trends because so it's somewhat TED Talk, somewhat just prepare the ultimate drinks combination of things. And I think competitors are super observant and they're watching other competitors and being like, what are they doing? And like, so I think, yeah, if you get second, you're thinking, well, what did first place do? How can I match that? And so they'll show up with something different the next year. And usually most people, you're given a stage and you're given a microphone for 15 minutes. So usually that person has something to say. Like there's usually some sort of like message that they're trying to communicate to the world. And that I think usually encourages people to make some small tweaks. But yeah, like I think it was this past year was the first time they included alternative milk. So for the longest time, it was just using cow's milk. And so opening the can of worms of alternative milk, it's like you got some people doing 20% cashew and 80% whole. And like, so that's just like a whole new world where it's like each competitor likely has slightly different milk. So it's interesting as a judge. You kind of are learning and adapting, which is helpful for those calibration days before competition to be like, okay, what are we locking in on for this event? And yeah, it's cool that it's in an evolving state too. And I think the leadership team is really trying to build it back up to get it to where it was, like pre-COVID. I think COVID kind of did a little hiccup for things, but yeah.
So I kind of want to ask you from a judge's perspective, like obviously we've talked a lot about the impact it has on an individual, both competing and judging in different ways. But then there's also the impact that competition has on the industry at large, just from the industry watching what happens, who wins, what they were doing when they won, what new toy were they using, and you have, I don't know what the things are called, but like the whiskey stone like things where you're pulling shots over chilled stainless steel ball bearings to chill your espresso. And then you have a few cafes that try to execute this stuff, and they're $14 for a freeze distilled latte or something, which I don't know if people are still trying to do that in cafes. But what do you think about the impact of competition from a greater industry perspective?
Yeah, I think like anything, there is positive impact and negative impact. I think the positive is a lot what you were speaking to earlier, of like equipment improvement, like grinders, integrated scales on espresso machines, even like tamps that we're using, that sort of stuff, clean workflow. Those are, I think, almost non-negotiable. Like, I don't know if people could argue like, no, that's actually not better for making coffee. I think where the negative impact is when people are trying to do things that they're not ready to do or that are wasteful. So there are some things, like you mentioned, freeze distilled milk, basically a concept of you freeze milk, then you let it just slowly melt, and like all of the high like fats and sugars are going to melt first and the water content is going to melt last. And so what you're left with is this milk that's delicious. It's like milkshake.
It's crazy sweet for those
crazy
that
sweet.
like it. Yeah.
But 1 gallon of milk will only yield like half a gallon of freeze distilled milk or whatever the ratio is. So pretty wasteful. Probably wouldn't make sense for a cafe that you're doing 1,000 lattes in the day or whatever it is. Like, I think when people are trying to do that and then you're charging whatever you have to charge for that and your customer base isn't that, then yeah, that's probably not a good outcome from it. Is it an interesting experience? Definitely. Like, that's an interesting experience to have. Do you need to provide that in a cafe? I don't think so necessarily. Like,
Right.
I see a lot of people doing like side taste experiences that are like kind of competition based and maybe like a seated ticketed event. And I think that is interesting because it's a smaller scale. It still creates space for people to engage with this thing, even if they're not in the competition community. But yeah, I don't think, like, I think of our customer base who, like, we have regulars who show up every single day and get the same drink. Like, I don't think the person who gets a cappuccino every day will all of a sudden be like, I need a freeze distilled milk cappuccino every single day.
Right.
Like, I don't think they need that.
I mean, but we serve espressos in tiny glass brandy snifters, and that was a thing from competition. And I think, essentially what the chilled, trying to chill the espresso. I mean, we're trying to present the espresso in a way that highlights things in a way that maybe the traditional demi-tasse ceramic mug doesn't. And in the snifter, like, we want people to experience the aromatics of the espresso. We want to cool it a little bit faster. We want you to engage with it differently. But I mean, we just experienced, I mean, we've seen some places that are taking competition, drinks and things and providing them in Jason Yo's deconstructed milk beverage at St. Frank and at Spro as well.
Yeah, I feel like competition, like, thinking about it, it's a great, like, it's like a lab of sorts. Like, it's a testing ground to try things. And then I think industry leaders kind of figure out, how do we adapt and like make this more scalable, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, I've seen competitors use like less coffee in their espresso, so they're gonna, and their whole angle is on sustainability. Like, what if we just use less coffee? That is a pretty powerful message and very like timely. And so, like, they were looking at, what tools do we need to put into place to be able to use 15 grams of coffee instead of 18 or 20. And so, like, I think the competition focus is like, how can we make waves on this topic? And then the industry kind of follows and just goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. Maybe we look into that.
Yeah.
That's kind of my like off the cuff thought.
Yeah.
On it.
And I think, I mean, maybe the last thing to chat about is, I think one of the other things that people in the industry kind of hold against competitions are that it does tend to, some individuals' motivation for it is placed all on the winning of the thing. And there are plenty of individuals who speak to what success has done for them professionally. And I think, for good or bad, there really isn't another platform in the coffee industry that provides you a track in the similar way to finding success on a different scale than what the competitions do. And we were just talking about, there was, and I can't think of the name of the podcast, but there was an interview with Layla Gambari, who was the 2014 U.S. Barista champion. Does that sound right? I should know, because I got third that year. That was
I was just looking at the dates too. That sounds right. Was that her first win? Because she won it again.
I think that was when she won the U.S. And she talks about just how it fast tracked. I think that was the word that she used. Not that it necessarily made her, Layla's an amazing coffee professional, and it had already had plenty of success professionally before competition, but how it fast tracked a lot of things for her career. And you see Black and White Coffee, two former U.S. Barista champions, partnered and started their own coffee company. and that's, I mean, they're one of many individuals who started their own businesses once they won. And so I think they're, that element to it, because, the reality is like, just because you won the US Brewers Cup doesn't mean that I want to work brew bar with you necessarily. Or doesn't, I still haven't seen a US Coffee and Good Spirits champion start their own cocktail bar. Those things are at this point not quite equivalent, although they should be. It is a game. It is different from working in the cafe environment, and so being the world barista champion doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best person to crush a rush per se. But
I think that's a good word. Like, it's not a business school. Like, you're not going through barista competition, you come out with an MBA. Like, there's still like a lot of things that you need to learn, I suppose. I definitely think what I appreciate by the verbiage from head judges going into competition week is like, you're looking, obviously score sheets speak for themselves, but whoever wins is an ambassador for the coffee community of whatever origin they're representing. And I think that's a pretty weighty like title. Is like, you're representing an entire community of people. And I think there are a lot of champions who have taken that very seriously, which is cool. But
yeah, and I think a lot of companies, I feel like there's a slightly different approach with some companies who are very supportive of their employees competing, recognizing that it's a great marketing opportunity. The outside world, it gives us a way to interact with the outside world, outside the industry, that has the ability to highlight specialty, even if it's not perfect. It does offer a platform to represent the specialty coffee industry. What parting piece of advice would you have for someone who is interested? I mean, the World Barista competition is coming up in October, I believe, and then a new season will kick off sometime this winter. And so for those that are listen to this, and I don't know if we provided anyone with any motivation or not.
Maybe we scared people from it.
But yeah, what little tidbit would you leave for someone who's thinking about they might be interested in any of the competitions?
Well, I feel like just reiterating what you said a few minutes ago of like, define what success looks like for you. Like, there's only one person who wins, and that'd be really sad if that means there's only one person who finds success at an event. So figure out, what does success look like for you? Maybe it's 7th at a regional. Maybe it's just getting there, and or whatever it is. Like, I think that's important. And be gracious with yourself. It's going to take time, and results will come. I think a lot of competitors that, as of recent, that we've seen win, have competed for a long time. So define what success looks like for you, and then chase it.
Yeah. Oh, that's good advice. And I think, if there are any of you, if you don't feel like competition is a very accessible thing for you, or maybe you don't work for a roaster, and so tends to be those that work for roasteries, it's a little bit easier to get support. But reach out to a coffee roaster that you work with and tell them you're interested, and or find. I mean, I find that past competitors are fairly gracious and pretty motivated in helping others compete, or giving them insights, and what steps to take should they want to go there. But talk to a roaster, tell them, read the rules first of all.
Wait, can that be my advice? Read the rules. Read the score sheet.
I feel like
learn the game.
It's like one of the first things we tell our folks, and then we still get kind of a little bit down the track and be like, wait a minute, have you read all the rules yet?
You mean can't serve mochas? I guess you could.
So I mean, you could. I know someone who did fairly. I mean, this was a long time ago, but they did fairly well serving essentially espresso and chocolate custard. I'm pretty sure, Scott Lucy, I'm pretty sure that was your signature drink one year, and you finished in the top 6 with that.
I respect that.
beverage.
That's awesome.
Pushing really hard on that Milwaukee custard. But read the rules, and that first and foremost would tell you, is this something I want to mess with or not? But I think going to either the company you work for or going to a roaster and saying, hey, I'm interested in competing and I know what I have to do and need some support in some capacity, whether it's coffee or some coaching or whatever.
Yeah.
But I would encourage you to start there. And we try to encourage our team a lot. Hey, it's worth trying. It's an opportunity to learn a lot about yourself, and in all likelihood, probably doing something that you do every day in a different capacity. So I'm always prone to encourage people to give it a shot.
Yeah. And go get a Julius Winfield.
Yeah.
And learn a little bit about.
We crushed them.
Coffee drinks.
He did
straight creamsicle.
That ice cube is doing its job with that slow dilution.
So tasty.
Shout out again to Revy for that beverage. But I think that wraps it up. Don't hesitate, in the comments on YouTube or any other platform, or hit us up on DM on Instagram if you have any questions about coffee competitions or Madcap's seasonal drink program or anything else. You can find us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the things. But thanks for listening. Stay proper.